You would think after all of the detentions we've handed out, after all of the fish that have been pilfered from Octabanel, after all of the snacks that Grim stole and subsequently ate, that the kiddos of NRC would have learned a lesson. But no, they're still causing Florida-flavored chaos wherever they go. And as a result, the Investigative Bureau is up to our necks in investigations. However, quite a few of you lovely viewers have heard our cries and stepped up to become junior detectives, promptly submitting reports of crimes you yourselves have witnessed. It is with this combined effort that I am delighted to say we've gotten 10 more cases solved that I'll be sharing with y'all today. Cases that all come from our lovely junior detectives. I am honestly shocked by how many submissions this silly little series has gotten, so I would like to take a moment to thank all junior detectives for their input regardless of whether their stories are being featured in this video. Your creativity is inspiring, and some of your tales might even end up in the next installment instead. Just like last time, all of the stories have been tweaked a bit to fit the flow of the previous Florida Man videos. However, their cores, culprits, and suspects are all the same as submitted. Speaking of submissions, if you would like to try your hand at reporting one of these crimes for the chance to be featured in a future video like this one, use the form linked in the description box below. And finally, while these scenarios are inspired by canon, they are all fabricated, so spoilers for EN content will be light if they exist at all. Now then, let's dive into our very first headline, courtesy of Ruggy's #1 fan. NRC student gets scolded after scaling historic campus building. One evening, several students' phones notified them that one of their peers had started a live stream on the popular social media platform Magicam. Upon opening the stream, these students were shocked to see their peer climbing one of the many historic buildings on campus. Staff were promptly alerted to the dangerous stunt and rushed to the scene, arriving just in time to see the student climbing back down the structure. Staff immediately reprimanded the adventurous climber before dishing out disciplinary action. Our suspects in this case are Gator, who is known to frequent Magicam, Floyd, who is known to parkour, and Lilia, who is known to be a bit adventurous. Who done it? This one was a tough one for me because I think Cater is a pretty obvious scapegoat, and yet Floyd would be crazy enough to record himself doing something like this. I kind of bounced between the two of them in my head before ultimately deciding on Floyd as the perpetrator. However, we'll have to turn it over to our junior detective to let us know the definitive truth. The culprit in this case was, in fact, Cater. How shocking! Cater had seen a trend on Magicam where folks were using forced perspective to make it look like they were climbing buildings and wanted to try it himself. After several failed attempts to employ this camera work, Cater instead decided to use some magic to climb the building himself, live streaming the process to capitalize on viewership. What he forgot in that moment was that he had added Riddle's brand new account as a friend, so when his house warden saw the stunt, it was all over. Staff decided to give the poor boy a month's worth of detention in an effort to not only scold the Diamond, but calm Riddle down, miraculously saving Cater from a collaring, but not from a long-winded scolding. Cater, you should have known better, buddy, but all is well that ends well, no? Thank you, Ruggy's #1 fan, for your delightful contribution. Now it is time to move on to our next headline, provided generously by SomeoneThat'sARiddleStan. What tale do you have for us today? NRC student found in teacher's lounge couch receives detention. During an otherwise ordinary day at lunch, student A and student B decided to play a childish game of hide and seek, during which student B got the bright idea to hide in the teacher's lounge, specifically the couch, so that student A would not be able to find them, inevitably resulting in their victory. Unfortunately for student B, Train came in to heat up his homemade lunch, and while microwaving his food, sat down on the couch to wait, resulting in student B and Train both shouting in surprise. Student B was given 3 days of detention as punishment for this stunt. Our suspects in this case are Ace, who was seen running from Deuce that afternoon, Floyd, who was seen running away from someone else that afternoon, and Rook, who was seen carefully staring at trees in the courtyard that afternoon. Who done it? Honestly, my bias against Ace ruled out logic in this case because I can't imagine Floyd or Rook pulling off this stunt. I feel like they would come up with a better way and perhaps less risky places to hide in if left to their own devices, but we of course won't know the truth until our junior detective weighs in. So who was it truly? According to the report, it was none other than Floyd who was playing this game of hide and seek, but with Sam, the mystery shop owner. This game was entirely one-sided and only viewed as hide and seek by Floyd, who had spontaneously pilfered something right out of Sam's lock during a lunchtime supply run for the lounge. Assuming that Sam and Azul wouldn't notice the theft since they were so deep in negotiations, the eel tried to casually leave the store. However, Sam very intelligently places a curse on all unpurchased items that result in his friends chasing down any student who tries to leave the shop without paying. Rather than fess up, Floyd thought it infinitely more entertaining to run from the spirits, mistaken as students by other individuals on campus, with Floyd eventually deciding that the teacher's lounge would be the best hiding spot because who would expect a student to be in the teacher's lounge? He would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for Train and his cold leftovers. The item was naturally returned, and Floyd received a few days of detention for the stunt. I'm not sure whether to be proud or disappointed in the eel, but regardless, thanks are in order for Someone That's a Riddlestan's lovely report. I wonder who it was that cooked up our next headline. Kai3212. What did you discover? Mysterious creature reported entering NRC campus in the dead of night identified. Rumors have been swirling around NRC's campus about a mysterious creature crossing through the mirror to wander the campus at night. Some say it's a ghost, some say it's a cryptid, but everyone seems to agree that it's curious and not of this world. A few days after these rumors began to spread, freshman Ortho Shroud was able to catch a glimpse of the creature. Though he was not able to get a lot of evidence, the blurry picture that he did snag was enough to positively identify the creature. Our suspects in this case are Grim, our resident dire beast, whose origins are a mystery, Mickey Mouse, our trans-dimensional dream friend, or Stitch, a literally out-of-this-world individual. Who was the mysterious creature? I can't give any honest speculation here since there was one little detail in the story that gave away our culprit, at least to me. So I'm going to turn it over to Kai3212 to reveal who this mysterious creature was. Our mysterious intruder was in fact Mickey Mouse. According to our junior detective, Mickey managed to enter Twisted Wonderland by sleeping, his spectral subconscious leaving his dream temporarily to explore NRC's campus. Apparently, our source reports that when Mickey awoke back in his world, he tried to convince his friends Donald and Goofy that Twisted Wonderland was real. However, his friends assumed this dream world was merely a ghost prank and dismissed him instead. Mickey, however, was not so convinced and decided to continue to visit Twisted Wonderland when his dreams let him, adding on to the lore of this mysterious creature around campus. Now, the first kiddo that I thought of when the mirror was mentioned was Mickey, though I suppose Stitch also comes to us through a mirror of sorts. Regardless, thank you, Kai3212, for your wondrous tale. Our next headline is from Serious Zero Art and Cause, who's reporting on the case. NRC students reported disrupted sleep at 3 a.m. courtesy of Hatsune Miku. One night, several NRC students awoke to the glorious voice of everyone's favorite Vocaloid star, Hatsune Miku. While this normally would have been cause for celebration, this particular incident was happening at 3 a.m., and everyone was much too tired to appreciate the music. Instead, they begrudgingly left their rooms to investigate the cause of the disturbance, eventually discovering the person responsible. Our suspects in this case are Ortho, who had been recently testing his synth voice with new combos, Lilia, who's been playing the guitar more frequently these days, or Idia, who's known to still be up at 3 a.m. with his lights on, gaming. Who done it? This one was a tough one because all three of these kiddos could have easily been the culprit. Ortho could be singing any number of Miku songs with his synth voice, Lilia could be shredding their melody, and Idia could have been practicing his glowing choreography a little less gracefully than normal. All three could have been up at this time of night, so I'm thoroughly stumped. So, Serious Zero Art and Cause, who is our culprit here? According to our junior detective, Idia was the cause of the disturbance. Apparently, Idia had recently discovered Hatsune Miku's discography and was so enamored with it that he decided to play some of her songs whilst he gamed that evening. Unfortunately, he forgot to plug his headphones in and kept upping the volume to try to hear the song, blissfully unaware that the reason it sounded muffled was because the song was going through his speakers and not his headphones. What was the perfect volume for the headphone-wearing Idia was not the perfect volume for all of those sleeping nearby, and a mortified Idia immediately silenced the song once his doormates confronted him. Thank you, Serious Zero Art and Cause, for alerting us to this embarrassing situation so that we could publicly air it to the entire world. I'm sure Idia appreciates it very much. But now it is on to our next headline, given to us by Tiki. NRC student brings entire computer setup to class. Setup gets confiscated. One day, as students were trickling into their morning classes, one student was seen bringing more than just their school books to class. Onlookers noted a monitor, mouse, PC, everything you could ever need for a decent computer setup. Some Ignihide students were a bit too curious about the specs and crowded around the tech-carrying student, their excited questioning alerting others to the situation. A large crowd formed around the tech-carrying student, which ended up not only blocking the hallway but alerting NRC staff. The teacher responsible for the class the student was attempting to attend quickly dispelled the curious onlookers but also confiscated the technology. Our suspects in this case are Idia, who was known to bring or be tech in class, Lilia, who was known to dabble in electronics, or Cater, who was also pretty tech-savvy. Who done it? It'd be really weird to have two Idia stories back to back, right? Plus, he doesn't usually attend class in person anyways, so he has no need to bring his whole setup with him when he's usually already at it anyways. Lily, on the other hand, could be trying to game and would have the muscles to carry everything. I guess it has to be him then, right? Well, let's see what our junior detective, Tiki, discovered. The culprit in this case is, in fact, Lilia, who had a late-night gaming session the day before. He and Gloomerai were talking about a new game that would be releasing at the same time as this particular class, with Gloomerai even commenting that they were considering skipping their school day altogether just to avoid spoilers later. Lilia, too, wished to have an unspoiled gaming experience, but this class's attendance policy was a bit too strict for him to simply skip it. Plus, what sort of role model would he be if he so flippantly ignored his student duties? As a vice house warden, no less. Thus, a brilliant plan was hatched to bring his entire gaming setup to class the next day so he could still attend whilst also getting to play the game. What a win-win it would have been if the setup hadn't been confiscated. Lilia, what are we gonna do with you? Thank you, Tiki, for bringing this delightful story to our attention. Now then, on to our next headline, which was graciously submitted by Cupcake Kitten. NRC student caught trying out for Royal Sword Academy Spell Drive team after being cut from Interdorm tournament. After rosters for the NRC Interdorm Spell Drive tournament were finalized, one student was very unhappy to see he was cut from the team. Believing that he was a phenomenal player that the whole world deserved to see, the student decided to seek out some alternatives. A certain Cheshire Cat agreed with their talent and informed the NRC student that the Royal Sword Academy tryouts were happening next week. After practicing for a few minutes every day, the NRC student headed over to RSA to try their luck. Unfortunately, while in line, they lamented about not being allowed on the NRC team, outing them as someone who did not go to RSA, which immediately disqualified them from the tryouts. The student was returned to NRC after an intense debate about talent and a few calls to Dire Crowley. As punishment, the student was made to clean the Spell Drive practice stadium for 3 days straight. Our suspects in this case are Grim, who believes he's the best at everything, Ace, who really wanted to participate in the tournament, and Apple, who is really invested in Spell Drive due to club commitments. Who done it? I'm personally of the opinion that Apple would have gotten selected for the team, so I'm disqualifying him from this consideration. I think Ace would have been too smart to let NRC slip in any fashion, although he may have forgotten to remove his heartmark makeup, which could have raised some questions. Grim wouldn't be able to keep his mouth shut and is also a dire beast, but I also kind of feel like RSA wouldn't question him nearly as much. I don't know, it's a big toss-up, so let's turn it over to Cupcake Kitten to reveal the answer. The culprit in this case was Grim, who sternly believed that if he was a part of any other dorm other than Ramshackle, he would have made the team, no questions asked. He begged Riddle to let him play for Heartsable, but Riddle, rule stickler that he is, refused to allow the unorthodox temporary transfer of Grim to Heartsable just for a sports game. The other house wardens were equally unhelpful, so Grim decided to throw his hat in with RSA. Fortunately for Grim, the students at that school were very welcoming of their unknown compatriot, up until he revealed that they were better than NRC and that those fools wouldn't know what greatness was if it hit them in the face. With the jesting of a certain Cheshire Cat, Grim spilled all of the beans and was gently asked to leave. However, Dire Crowley eventually had to be called in when the furball refused to budge. Punishment was swift and merciless, almost resulting in an expulsion if the prefect of Ramshackle Dorm hadn't stepped in to quell the headmage's fury. In all my year of being an investigator, I have never seen such a fortunate reduction in sentence for any slight against NRC involving RSA. Grim should be kissing the very ground he's walking upon in gratitude. A hearty thanks to Cupcake Kitten for this report. What sort of tale does our next junior investigator, plus 056, have in store for us? NRC student accused of starting fight headbutts teacher while being restrained. During a particularly stressful week, NRC staff was alerted to a fight breaking out in the middle of the courtyard. Upon arriving at the scene, staff spotted one student slamming another into the ground in a fit of rage. The staff promptly separated the two students. However, in the process of restraining the suspected inciter, the student headbutted Professor Train. The shock loosened the professor's grip and the student was freed, exchanging more harsh words and eventually reigniting the fight. Other students at the scene reported that the altercation was deliberate and were not shocked at how quickly it escalated. Both fighters were reprimanded to the dismay of the alleged inciter, who knew the entirety of their dorm would never let them live this permanent blot on their school record down. Our suspects in this case are Floyd, who was heard complaining about being bored near the scene, Riddle, who was seen in a foul mood earlier that day, and Sebek, who was scolding a student that dared to insult Wakasama in his presence. Who done it? This is textbook Sebek in my mind, unless the other party in this fight was in fact Floyd. The report didn't name the two individuals, so there is a chance that Floyd was involved, but the eel wouldn't have been upset at the scuffle being added to his record, nor would any of Octavanel care that he got into a fight. Diasomnia would be interested in Sebek's exploits, and Riddle would be concerned about his record, but I think between the two of them, Sebek would be more likely to get into a scuffle like this and get tunnel vision during it to not even notice that he headbutted a teacher, so I'm gonna go with him. However, our junior detective may say different. Apparently, it was actually Riddle. Poor boy was stressed about his studies, a certain pair of rule-breaking freshmen, and the stiff and sore back he had gotten as a result of falling asleep at his desk the night prior. This put Riddle in an already foul mood, which he was attempting to clear by taking a walk through the school's sunny courtyard. But as with all good intentions, the road to ruin was laid before him in the form of Floyd, who thought it'd be super funny to tug at the back of Riddle's head. This snapped the already thin wire within Riddle, and I imagine all of us know how that went. Floyd, though, isn't typically one to back down from a fight, so the two started tearing up the grounds. Being so consumed with rage, Riddle didn't register that it was Professor Train trying to restrain him and not one of his card soldiers, so it's no surprise that he paid no mind to the unintentional headbutt. It was only after Floyd was successfully collared that reality hit for the both of them, and they were punished accordingly, though Floyd was given a harsher punishment once it was revealed he was the instigator. I certainly didn't expect it to truly be Riddle, even with Floyd involved, but I suppose that's what I get for doubting the eel. Thank you so much for your contribution, +056. On to our next headline, courtesy of MinionEnji. NRC student seemingly unfazed after allegedly unleashing an endangered animal onto Main Street. One morning, during the rush to class, many of the NRC students on Main Street were confused as a rare and endangered animal under the family tree, and I am absolutely going to be pronouncing this wrong, Cervidae, suddenly went on a tirade around them. Horns up and stomping its hooves fended off anyone who came near it, even attempting to headbutt multiple Hartslevel students who were trying to intervene. While the responding NRC staff handled the endangered species with care, they did note that the deer was not purposefully injuring any of the students, nor was the deer running around in fright. Once captured and safely escorted away by Coach Vargas and Professor Train, Headmage Crowley began to interrogate students to decipher what exactly had happened to trigger this unexpected animal visit. None of the students nearby had a clear answer as to how the Cervidae got there, but they did point some fingers at likely culprits. Our suspected instigators in this case are Jack, who normally encounters a variety of wildlife on his early morning run, Ace, who was one of the first students to respond to the animal once it began rampaging, and Silver, who was found sleeping blissfully nearby. In a case as mysterious as this, I think it's important that we also consider the testimony of the suspects. Jack claimed that animals often run from him during his jogs and that Vil had accompanied him that morning. So if he had brought the deer to Main Street somehow, Vil would have likely seen it. He was also fending off the more mischievous students who were seeking to anger the deer further, which he claims he wouldn't have done if he had brought the deer there to cause chaos. Ace claims that fingers are only being pointed at him due to past alleged mischief he supposedly wrought with the Hartslevel animals. However, he noted that the hedgehogs and flamingos are very different from a deer, and that he was one of the first students to try to calm the deer, so how could he be responsible for the disturbance if he was actively trying to resolve it? Silver claims to have been asleep for the whole ordeal. He was allegedly scoping out the area before Malleus got there, since he had heard rumors of a suspicious, possibly spectral individual wandering around campus the night before. Silver also claimed to have seen Jack and Vil jogging through Main Street that morning, but he fell asleep shortly after and only woke up once the headmage's interrogation began. With all of this information in hand, I now ask you, who done it? This case is mysterious indeed, as I don't quite know who to believe about what. and I almost feel like another student deliberately obfuscated their involvement by pointing fingers at these three. I suppose we yet again must rely on our junior detective for the truth. According to MinionEnji, Silver not only took responsibility for the animal, but puzzled NRC staff while doing so. Silver told him that he's been known to draw in animals while he's napping outside upon campus grounds, a story the staff were reluctant to believe. However, Sebek, Lilia, and Malleus all vouched that this does happen and that it's completely out of Silver's control. This rare deer had been on the island for some time, a fact that Vargas corroborated, along with testimony that the deer was healthy and unharmed upon retrieval. Train was also able to get a statement from the deer once it calmed down enough to talk, in which it said that it simply fell asleep alongside Silver, but when the noisy Hartzlable students started shoving each other around and shouting, the deer got startled and upset. This caused it to be briefly frightened, so it decided to shield the still sleeping Silver from the sudden and presumably dangerous people which appeared. Due to this incident, Silver was warned to always have someone looking out for him so that his defenseless sleeping wouldn't attract more animals to cause a similar uproar. The deer had disappeared back into the woods surrounding campus and has yet to be seen again. Poor Silver, unintentionally causing all these issues with his Disney princess powers. But lucky us to have gotten to hear this story. Thank you, MinionEnji, for your submission. Next up, we've got a tale from Csilla. NRC student causes chaos in library with spell. The quiet atmosphere of Night Raven College's library was disrupted when every book, both shelved and archived, suddenly levitated into the air. The entire library was filled with a cyclone of tomes, scrolls, and grimoires, all loudly reciting their contents in multiple languages simultaneously. The cacophony of voices, lasting 3 total hours, caused widespread confusion among students and staff. Several students were unable to exit the building due to enchanted encyclopedias blocking the doors. At least 4 volumes attempted to cast spells of their own, resulting in a brief fire in the herbalism section that staff were quick to respond to. The library ghosts reportedly took a tea break, claiming that dealing with this sort of fiasco was not in their job description. The books returned to their proper shelves precisely at 5:32 p.m., as if nothing had happened, bewildering witnesses almost more than the cyclone itself. Our suspects in this case are Riddle, who recently got approval to practice advanced enchantments without supervision, Jade, who was seen in the library earlier that day allegedly brewing a pot of herbal tea, and Malleus, who wasn't placed at the library specifically, but the intensity of the magic and duration of the spell implicated him anyways. Who done it? As much as I'd love to pin this on Jade, because who brews tea in a library with all of the books? Books that are notorious by their very nature, susceptible to moisture? That in and of itself is a crime, but it's not this specific crime. So instead, I'm gonna have to go with Malleus. Even though Riddle is really good with visualization, I doubt he'd unleash this sort of storm, even unintentionally. As always, though, we've got to consult with our junior detective Csilla to learn the truth. In this case, our culprit was indeed Malleus, who had been invited to the library by you so that the pair could study together for an upcoming test. While Malleus could easily understand the lesson, you was struggling. The prefect confessed to the dragon that if they could just hear the lesson again, it might help. So, to help his friend, Malleus enchanted the books to start reading out loud themselves. But, in his haste to help, Malleus put a little too much energy into the magic, causing the whole library to erupt in a storm of voices. One would have thought that a being as powerful as Malleus would be able to rectify this far faster than 3 whole hours later, but Malleus had a very good, totally valid, ironclad alibi for his lack of action. He had to protect you from the flying books, and therefore had to concentrate entirely on preserving the magic barrier he put up around them. That is it. That is the entire reason. It had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that you had become so startled they immediately jumped up and clung to the dragon with tears threatening to fall. It couldn't possibly have been because Malleus was too embarrassed by his friend's fear to confess that he was the source of the sudden spell, especially after they refused to let him go after the protective barrier was up. Who could, nay would, ever accuse Malleus of such? Certainly not this investigative bureau. Thank you so much, Csilla, for your contribution. Last but not least, we have a report from the world-famous Vil Schoenheit. Tell us, what chaos have you witnessed, Vil? NRC student releases fire-breathing monster into campus theatrical performance. One evening, the students of the NRC Drama Club were performing a play they'd been rehearsing for the past few months, only to have the performance interrupted suddenly by a very distressed fire-breathing monster. The creature burst onto the scene, stage left, shooting flames back towards the actors, touching up their makeup in the wings. This monster was quickly captured by Professor Carell before being identified as Grim of Ramshackle Dorm. Grim informed the professor the fire-breathing wasn't intentionally meant to disrupt the play, but was merely a means to get the students chasing him to leave him alone. In his panic, Grim had run out onto the stage and, assuming the students was still behind him, shot flames back at the actors. Shortly after this confession, the student who allegedly chased Grim revealed themselves, taking responsibility for the damages since Yu was off campus and therefore unable to. Our suspects in this case are Trey, who Yu had asked to watch Grim for an hour, Rook, who had stopped by Ramshackle to chat with Trey about something for the science club, and Jade, who was with Rook since the hunter offered to go mountaineering with Jade once he had finished speaking with Trey. Who done it? I'm going to assume this one was Rook because I don't know who else would frighten Grim enough and chase him towards the play that's going on. Jade doesn't seem like the type to run, and Trey is the type to never ever start trouble, so it had to be Rook, right? Vil, what say you? In a shocking twist of events, it was all three of our suspects' combined efforts that drove the dire beast to disrupt the play. You had gone into town with someone named Horton to try out a new ice cream parlor, so they had asked Trey to keep an eye on Grim in the meantime. Trey agreed on the condition that the prefect help him with the next birthday party's preparations, something they readily agreed to. While watching Grim, Rook appeared to ask Trey about an experiment, with Jade tagging along behind him. As Trey and Rook spoke, Jade turned his attention to Grim with a clinical, scientific curiosity. Jade's questions about what Grim was, if his ears felt warm, if his tail had nerves, all put Grim on edge. Then came the poking and prodding, an activity Rook also started to participate in as he critiqued the dire beast's hair care routine. On the topic of self-care and bone structure, courtesy of Jade, Trey also started asking questions about Grim's teeth, going so far as to inspect the critter's mouth while Rook held him up. After about 20 minutes of this invasive preening, Grim had had enough and wiggled his way out of their collective grasp long enough to run. And run he did, all the way to the theater. Trey initially took the brunt of the blame, but Rook and Jade eventually also implicated themselves in the fiend's fiery tirade. All three were punished with 2 weeks of theater cleanup and prep, helping the drama club with whatever they needed during the remaining run of the play. Thank you, Vil, for this fantastic tale, and a big thanks to all of our junior detectives who provided these wonderful reports. If yours was not featured, fear not, for it may appear in the next installment. And if this has perhaps inspired you to investigate the happenings of NRC, consider submitting your own report to the Investigative Bureau using that form linked in the description. Maybe your name will be up here next time. But until then, let me know how many of these wacky tales you got right, how many you got wrong, and whatever else you may want to say in the comments below. You could always give this video a like and maybe even subscribe if you feel so inclined. But regardless of what you choose to do, I just have to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.